ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa bọ̀ Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó dúró tán fún jàǹgbara òmìnira ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó ń gbẹnu ọmọ Yorùbá sọ̀rọ̀ fún òmìnira ilẹ̀ wa. Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó ń sọ̀rọ̀ sókè fún òmìnira ìran aládé gbogbo. Yoruba World Media. Lórí YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. Yoruba World Media. Láti darapọ̀ mọ́ wa tàbí tẹ́ ẹ bá fẹ́ bá wa dòwò pọ̀ ní Yoruba World Media, ẹ kàn sí wa lórí www.yorubaworldmedia.com tàbí kẹ́ fi àtẹ̀jíṣẹ́ ṣọwọ́ sí wa látòrí ímeèlì wa info@yorubaworldmedia.com. Yoruba World Media, ìkànnì tó ń sojú ọmọ Yorùbá jákèjádò ayé.
Ìpínlẹ̀ Yorùbá ti ṣiṣẹ́.
Ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa gbọ́. Ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa gbọ́ Yoruba World Media.
Kò ní gbé àwọn ọ̀dàlẹ̀ abálẹ̀ lọ tàbí ní ìgbèríko wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ọgbọ́n ìlùmọ̀kọ́rọ́ yìí láti gba ilẹ̀ ayébáyé wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìgbìmọ̀pọ̀ Fúlàní láti múni sìn títí ayé láti sọ wá di ará nílùú bàbá wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìgbìmọ̀pọ̀ Fúlàní láti sọ àwọn obìnrin wa di àkísà orí àtìtàn nílùú wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìsọfúlàní di òmìrán tí ẹnikẹ́ni kò lè fọwọ́ kàn lábẹ́ òfin pẹ̀lú ìwà ọ̀bàyéjẹ́ tó wà lọ́wọ́ wọn.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìwọlé bánijà lóru ọ̀gànjọ́ tí wọ́n fi pa àwọn akíkanjú méjì nílé olóyè Sunday Adéyẹmọ Ìgbòho Òòṣà ní ọjọ́ kìíní oṣù kejì ọdún 2021.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìgbìyànjú Fúlàní láti sọ ìlú wa di tiwọn àti láti gba ilẹ̀ ìbí wa pẹ̀lú àwọn ẹbí wọn láti orílẹ̀-èdè adúláwọ̀ Áfíríkà láti jẹ́ kí wọ́n lè máa gbé igbá orókè nínú ètò ìdìbò.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Èròǹgbà àwọn Fúlàní láti fi owó ṣe ẹ̀tànjẹ fún àwọn ènìyàn wa láti gbàgbé ìpolongo fún àdádúró àwọn Yorùbá.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ìfimọ̀ṣe ọ̀kan àwọn Yorùbá láti ní orílẹ̀-èdè tiwa fún ìrandíran àwọn ọmọ wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Àtìmọ́lé àwọn ènìyàn wa pàápàá jùlọ arákùnrin wa Ìgbòho Òòṣà nílùú Kọ̀tọ́nú, àìbìkítà ìjọba Fúlàní fún pípa àwọn ọmọ Yorùbá ní orílẹ̀-èdè Yorùbá.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
A kò ní gbàgbé. Ìpínlẹ̀ Yorùbá di ṣíṣe, ìwẹ̀yìn wò kò sí rárá. Yorùbá ẹ jí ẹ má sùn, Oòduà gbè wá o, kò ní gbé àwọn ọ̀dàlẹ̀ abálẹ̀ lọ. Fúlàní Sẹ́ríkì joyè ní ìgbèríko wa.
A kò lè gbàgbé.
Ọgbọ́n ìlùmọ̀kọ́rọ́ yìí láti gba ilẹ̀ ayébáyé wa.
A kò lè
síwájú ọkọ̀ ire àtọ̀hún tó dára. Ọmọ Oòduà nìyẹn. Mo sì mọ ẹ̀tọ́ rẹ̀ níwọ̀n ní ìmọ́lẹ̀ ọ̀pọ̀ adúláwọ̀.
Mo kí wa pé àkójúmọ̀mà àkójúmọ̀ rẹ̀ lónìí Olódùmarè yóò jẹ́ kí ojúmọ́ ayọ̀ kó máa ẹnì kọ̀ọ̀kan wa. Mo kí ọmọdé, mo kí àgbàlagbà, mo kí ọkùnrin, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí obìnrin. Pé káàbọ̀ sí orí ètò wa fún tòní. Lórí ètò wa fún tòní, òun náà ni a pè ní ìran Yorùbá, eléyìí tí bàbá wa tí wọ́n jẹ́ ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Dr. tí wọ́n yóò máa bá wa dá sí ní ọjọ́ tòní. Mo fẹ́ pèkì orúkọ wọn dáadáa tó mo fẹ́ fi tọ̀wọ̀ fẹ́ fi dá orúkọ wọn. Mo kí wa bá ká ìpè káàbọ̀ tẹ́ darapọ̀ mọ́ ẹ̀yìn wa tẹ́ mo wá. Àkọlé ètò wa tòní òun náà ní 1988 British and Yorubaland Treaty. Kí ni tó ṣẹlẹ̀ láàrin 1988? Kí ni àdéhùn èyí tí àwọn British èyí tí wọ́n ṣe pẹ̀lú orílẹ̀-èdè ilẹ̀ Nàìjíríà àti wọ́n ṣe dàwápọ̀? Òun náà ni bàbá wa ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Olúṣọlá ní Dr. Olúṣọlá Òní tí wọ́n máa bá wa yẹn tó wá mọ̀ sí bá a ṣẹ́gun. Àwọn ni wọ́n máa bá wa tàkùrọ̀sọ lọ́jọ́ tòní bí ètò ọ̀hún bí ó bá ṣe ń lọ. Màá fi àsìkò yìí màá rọ̀ pé torí pé a ti rí wọn ọjọ́ ti pẹ́ díẹ̀ ní orí ètò wa. Mo dẹ̀ mọ̀ pé kì í ṣe bóyá pé wọ́n dákẹ́, wọ́n ń bá iṣẹ́ ọ̀hún káàkiri, wọ́n ń ṣe iṣẹ́ ọ̀hún lọ ní gbogbo ibikíbi tí wọ́n ti ń ṣe. Kódà wọ́n tún ní àwọn other program tó ṣe kó tó wà important ju eléyìí lọ pé gbogbo tí wọ́n ni wọ́n ń gbàdúrà pé kí ìran Yorùbá kókò ní òkú ẹrú tí wọ́n sì ń jẹ́ ká mọ̀ pé tí ọmọdé wo bàbá tàn ọmọdé ọ̀hún ó ní láti bá àrọ́bá sì rèé bàbá ìtàn òun náà ni mo fà sí pé ọlọ́kí bàbá wa ọ̀tọ̀ olùsọ̀lá òde wọn kàbọ̀ sí àwọn bá mi kí àwọn bàbá ìwà tí wọ́n ní ìrìnlẹ̀ sáré ṣe pọ̀.
Ekale, thank you very much for inviting me back to your program. My apologies for my long absence. It is not that I've not been doing anything. If I repeat, my name is Olushola Oni. I am the founder and leader of the Yoruba Party in the UK, as you can see from my T-shirt. What I'm going to talk about today is the 1888 Britain Yorubaland Treaty. I'm going to talk briefly about the legal meaning of this treaty, because I think one of the problems with us is that not only has this treaty been hidden from sight for 100 years or more, it is also the case that we don't seem to know actually what it means. Now, the 1888 Britain Yorubaland Treaty is the only document in existence which defined the legal relationship between Britain on one side and Yorubaland on the other side. The treaty was signed by Queen Victoria for Britain and Alaafin Adeyemi for Yorubaland. Now, the Yoruba Party in the UK is doing two things in respect of this treaty. The first thing is that we have gone to court. The party has gone to the administrative court in London to ask the court to compel the British government to abide by the terms of the treaty. The second thing that the party is doing is that the party is taking the treaty, we've taken to the road to educate people about this treaty, which has been hidden from everybody for over 100 years. So those are the two things we are doing. We've taken the case to court. We've asked the court to force the British government to abide by the terms of the treaty. And we also have, if you want to call it a roadshow or whatever, in which we've been going around talking to people about the treaty. And in fact, I've just finished a series of 4 lectures on the clubhouse. Can you just give me a minute, please? Can I call you back, please? Now, the document that Britain requested for in a letter dated 23rd of May, 1888, and which the Queen and the Alaafin signed on the 23rd of July, 1888, was a treaty. And I think it is important that we made that point right at the beginning. The document that the British requested for, and which the Queen and the Alaafin of Oyo signed on the 23rd of July, 1888, was a treaty. Britain called it a treaty. Britain would not have signed a document and called it a treaty if it was not a treaty. The treaty has been authenticated by a number of authorities, and the handwritten copy is available. So if you go to the National Archives in London, you can actually read a handwritten version of this treaty. You remember in those days, a lot of things weren't done by typing, they were done by handwriting. And you can, if you go to the National Archives in London, you can actually read the treaty yourself. Now, it is also important to establish that the status of Yorubaland as a country in its own right had been documented in British official documents, including the Osborne, for example, the Osborne West African Committee report of 1898. So the British officially had recognized that the Yoruba land was a country. The document that the Queen and the Alaafin ratified on the 16th of July 1890, some 2 months after it was signed, was a treaty. So it is again important that we stress that this was also that this document that the Queen ratified in July 1890 was a treaty. Britain would not have demanded ratification at Article 9 of the treaty if it did not regard it as a treaty. So the treaty that they demanded to be ratified by the Queen at Article 9 of the treaty was a treaty. Okay, Joban, was a treaty. So ratification made the treaty binding and valid under international law. So the adoption of descriptive phrases such as forever and so on in the treaty showed that the treaty was intended to be everlasting. So this wasn't a treaty that they just, did at a whim. First of all, they asked for it, then they signed it. Now they have ratified it. And the language that they used was to show that this treaty was forever. It wasn't for just a period of time. There's no escape clause in the treaty. There's no termination clause in the treaty. So Britain intended for this treaty to be stable, to be permanent. I think it is important to go through what I've just said because it is important that we understand that this 1888 Britain-Yorubaland Treaty is the only document available, the only document in existence which defined the legal relationship between Britain and Yorubaland. So, people talk about amalgamation, they talk about independence, they talk about colonialism and so on and so forth. Those things are not, they did not establish any legal relationship between Britain and Yorubaland. Those are political relationships. When you talk of amalgamation, when you talk of colonialism, when you talk of granting of independence, all those things are just political relationships. The only document that tells us the legal relationship between Yorubaland and Britain is this 1888 Britain-Yorubaland Treaty. That's the only one that tells us that Britain has a legal relationship under a relationship under the law with Yorubaland. And as I've tried to explain, the Yoruba Party in the UK were doing two important things. The first one is that we've gone to court to try and force the British government to implement the terms of the treaty. And secondly, we're doing what I'm doing now, which is going on the road and trying to educate our people and the people out there in general about the treaty, because this treaty has been hidden from sight for the last 100 years. And I will reiterate again, this was a treaty. So it is important that we understand that this was a treaty. And as I said, Britain called the document a treaty. So if they called it a treaty, they meant that it was a treaty. So nobody can come around and tell us that, oh, well, what did the Yoruba know? What did the Alaafin understand? He was just signing anything. The fact of the matter is that the British who signed this document with the Alaafin, they called it a treaty. When they wrote to the Alaafin to request for a treaty, they called it a treaty. On top of the document itself, it says the treaty. So there's no ambiguity. There's nothing that anybody can say they didn't know what they were doing or this isn't true or whatever. This was a treaty. And remember what we said, this treaty, the importance of it is that it tells us or it defines the existence of a legal relationship between Britain and the Yoruba. Now, Article 8 of the treaty made very clear that this treaty was based on an understanding of a legal concept called quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means you give me something, I give you something in return. You give me something of value, I give you something of value in return. In this treaty, what the British did was they gave the Alaafin a yearly, you can call it a stipend or you can call it a salary if you like, in return for the Alaafin's guarantee of a free and preferential market. So they said to the Alaafin, you sign this treaty with us, promising that you are going to give us a market where our people can trade, and every year we will pay you a certain amount of money. And the last payment that the Alaafin received was in 1890. So I imagine if the current Alaafin takes this up, Britain is owing him a lot of money because they haven't paid him or his successor, the Alaafin, for over 100 years. So, what is the legal force? What is the legal significance of the treaty? There are three things. Number one, the treaty was binding between Britain and Yorubaland as independent sovereign states. A treaty can only be signed between independent sovereign states. So immediately that Britain signed the treaty with Yorubaland, Britain recognized Yorubaland as an independent sovereign state. Not only did Britain ratify the treaty, Britain also published the treaty as being ratified. So the first thing the first legal force or legal significance was that the treaty was binding between Britain and Yorubaland as independent sovereign states. The second thing is that the frontiers and the borders of Yorubaland were clearly established by description. So in the treaty itself, it tells you exactly what was meant by Yorubaland. So this was not, if you like, a virtual Yorubaland, an esoteric Yorubaland. The frontiers and the borders of Yorubaland were clearly established by description. All right. And the final thing was that there was no cession of territory or relinquishing of sovereignty. And this is very, very important. The Yoruba said, we were not going to give up 1 inch of our land. The British agreed that the Yoruba were not going to give up 1 inch of their land. The Yoruba said they were not going to relinquish their sovereignty. And the British agreed that, yes, there will be no relinquishing of sovereignty. Again, these are very important concepts. So I give no apologies for repeating them because I think it is important that we realize that this treaty is so important because it tells us exactly what the legal relationship of Britain and Yorubaland is all about. So, sorry if I repeat myself. The first legal force is that the treaty was binding between Britain and Yoruba. Neither of them can escape it. Britain cannot escape from this treaty. Yorubaland cannot escape from this treaty. The second thing is that what they understood to be Yorubaland was defined in the treaty. So the Britain and Yorubaland and the Queen and the Alaafin agreed that this is what is called Yorubaland. And the third thing was that the Yoruba said, we are not giving up 1 inch of our land, and we are not giving up our sovereignty. So I hope that I've made that clear. And it is also important for us to understand that Britain made its intention clear and unambiguous. People start talking, when they signed the treaty, this is what they meant, this is it. No. The intention of the British was made absolutely clear and unambiguous, and there are three of them. The first intention was to establish a permanent understanding between Yorubaland and Britain. So the intention of the treaty, the first intention of the treaty, was to establish a permanent understanding between Yorubaland and Britain. The second intention that Britain had was to establish friendship and goodwill between Yorubaland and Britain, from which others were excluded. You know, like in a marriage, when a man and a woman are married, all others are excluded. And it's exactly the same here. That this treaty was to establish friendship and goodwill between Britain on one hand and Yorubaland on the other hand, from which every other country, every other state was excluded. And the third thing, which is also important, which is probably important for a lot of people who say a lot of nonsense about Lagos. The third important reason why Britain wanted a treaty with Yorubaland was to establish Lagos as the first corner of Yorubaland. Most people don't. So when people start talking, we made Lagos, we created Lagos, it's nonsense. Because the 1888 Britain-Yorubaland Treaty was intended to establish Lagos as the first corner of Yorubaland. Okay, so we know the intention of the British. What were the intentions of the Alaafin? So we know what the British wanted. What did the Alaafin want? And the Alaafin wanted two things, which will surprise many of these people who say demand, the Yoruba leaders in those days were illiterate. They didn't know anything. They were just signing whatever was put in front of them. They had no idea what they were doing, and so on and so forth. The Alaafin made his intentions clear and unambiguous. You couldn't say anything otherwise. And there are two things. His intention was to enter into and maintain forever friendly relations with subjects of Her Majesty the Queen. That's the first thing. He wanted to establish friendly and maintain it for not just establish a friendly relation, but something that was going to be forever, not temporary, not for 10 years, but for eternity. And the second intention that he had was to develop the resources of Yorubaland by the means of legitimate trade. So here we are, somebody that, modern people, or whatever you want to call us now, refer to as illiterate, whatever you think about him. He wanted, his intention in signing a treaty with Britain was to develop his country, his Yoruba country, Yorubaland. That was his intention. So when he went into sign a treaty with Britain, he didn't just say, I want to trade with you. No. His intention was that when we trade, what we get from that trade, the profit from that trade, I want to use it to develop Yorubaland. So I'm going to stop that to allow you to ask me any questions that you like. Basically, I hope that I've explained to you the legal meaning, the legal importance of the 1888 Britain-Yoruba Land Treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone that is watching us. We are with Babawa, Dr. Oni, the founder of Yoruba Party in UK. Today's topic, it is 1888 Treaty, British and Yorubaland. And Baba said in it that the treaty was signed in 16th of July 1890, which was signed by the Queen of Victoria for British and Alaafin Oyo. But in order to clarify this, Baba, I think I read one treaty, which I will read it out because I know that the treaty was not signed by Alaafin Oyo alone. If I'm right, sir, this treaty was signed by each individual king, by their kingdom, because one of the treaty that I have here said, if I'm right, sir, I have one of the treaty here that said the recognition of Oni of Ife. I will just read it out. Although the Awujale, the Oba Ijebu, has his own traditional ruler, and Awujale of Jebu ruler, and then from that at the end, they said Ijebu kingdom separate treaty from Alaafin Oyo. That Ijebu kingdom have their own treaty, because according to this, it is very long that Ife have their own treaty signed with the British. Oyo, under the Alaafin Oyo, have their own treaty signed with the British. Ijebu also have their own treaties signed with British. Is it true, sir? Because I have a couple of several treaties which was signed by each kingdom, and then the British government operate with each kingdom according to their treaty.
Okay, this was the trick that the British tried to use after the Yoruba Treaty included all these places you are talking about. Etu, Ijebu, Egba, they were all included. This was a treaty that encompassed Yorubaland. The treaties that you are discussing are treaties that I think it was Captain Bauer that was going around. He was the British resident at Ibadan, who was going around signing treaty with anybody who signed with him. There are actually probably up to about 100 treaties that he was signing everywhere. The difference between this treaty and all those other treaties, remember what I said? First, there was a letter on the 23rd of May, sir? 1888. Let me finish. All right. There was a letter requesting for this treaty from the Alaafin. Number two, the treaty was then signed on the 23rd of July, 1888. And number three, the treaty was ratified on the 16th of June, 1890. So those three elements were present in this 1888 treaty, which are not present in the others.
All right, sir. Because I just want for the sake of those who are watching us to be clarified on this, that this is a treaty that was signed by Alaafin Oyo, but at the bottom of that treaty, the treaty said, Oyo is a common knowing as Yoruba kingdom. Please, I want sir to list. I know that you are my father, and then I'm learning from you, sir. But I just want to listen to just be clear to our audience, because I think this have caused some chaos once upon a time where we are dealing with Oni and Alaafin Oyo concerning this treaty. But at the bottom of the treaty that was signed by Alaafin Oyo, the late Alaafin Oyo Oba Adeyemi, the treaty said Oyo is a common known as the Yoruba kingdom, and embrace the town of Oyo, Awe, Akimari, Ilora, Iseyin, Papa, Atade, also Sabo country. They call them country. That is about five towns called the country. Here we hereby further clarify that the town name in the margin are under the direct influence of the Balogun and authority of Ibadan, and that the above enumerated town and country of Sabe with the territory also the town detail in the margin replace now Yoruba proper, of which the capital is Oyo, with Adeyemi as the acknowledged Alaafin or the king over the whole. From this treaty, the treaty just mentioned about 5 towns, which they said the 5th town is under Ibadan, under Balogun of Ibadan.
How can no? I mean that's just I'm sorry, that's just nonsensical. I've had this before so many times, and I think that treaty was supposed to have been signed in 1893.
Because this is a copy of that treaty, sir.
Yeah, look. If you want to know the copy of a proper treaty, you go to the National Archives. This is a copy of the real treaty.
All right, sir.
So that treaty that you are reading, I think, if I'm correct, was signed in 1893.
This one was signed.
Was it signed in 1888?
Let me just check when it was signed. The date is not there.
That is a treaty of 1893.
Okay.
The treaty that I'm talking about was signed by Alaafin Adeyemi alone.
Yes, also this one was signed by Alaafin Adeyemi also.
No, alone. It wasn't signed by anybody else. He signed it alone in the presence of Samuel Johnson, clerk in the Holy Order. There were 2 people who are present as witnesses to the signature. This is what you're talking about has been said to me many times to try and muddy the water. That treaty that you are discussing, in fact, I think I wrote a piece about it a while ago.
Okay, this one was signed. This one was signed by Samuel Johnson. Listen, this one was signed by Samuel Johnson, the clerk of the Holy Order. William Moses, scripture reader, on behalf of the Majesty, the Queen, Alfred.
No. What I'm telling you is that somebody has been trying to play some kind of con trick.
All right, sir.
The treaty that I've just told you about, you can read it at the National Archives in London. All this other nonsense that you are reading, in fact, if you, for example, if you go on to, is it Grog, which is what is named Elon Musk's AI channel. In fact, it describes a different 1888 treaty altogether. There has been an attempt to muddy the water with all sorts of nonsense that people are talking all over the place. If you want to read this treaty, you go to the National Archives. It is handwritten. In fact, there's another version of this treaty, which is on a canvas, where people are trying to pretend to show that the paper on which it was written was some kind of ancient paper. The difference between everything that you are reading is that this treaty was recognized, it was published in London.
All right, sir. If
I think this is important actually.
All right, sir.
The existence of this treaty has been verified by the British and foreign state papers, 1973 to 19. So the British themselves, the British government, actually published this treaty in London. Second thing, the treaty appears in what is called a map of Africa by treaty. This was by the curator of the archives of the Foreign Office. He wrote a book called A Map of Africa by Treaty. The 1888 treaty is present in it, and in fact, he referred to Article 7, which is the non-session bit of the treaty. Samuel Johnson also published this treaty in his 1921 book, so you can read it there. And then finally, as I said, if you go to the National Archives in London, you will see this treaty written by hand. So people, what has happened is that because this treaty has been hidden from sight for a long time, and then when we started talking about it, which many people didn't know about, all sorts of versions have turned up. The treaty that I'm talking about now, even the government has had problems tracing it. That's how hidden it is from sight. But as I said, if you want to read about it, you go to the National Archives and you'll find this treaty there. So we are not going to be sidetracked by anybody who's having a fight between the Ijebu and the Egba. We're not going to sidetrack by them at all. This was a Yoruba-wide treaty. There's no other treaty like it.
Yeah,
and the idea that the Olubadan was signing a treaty as somebody who was higher than Alafin is just nonsensical. Totally nonsensical.
Because you already mentioned something that I wanted to say concerning, because the treaty was signed in 1880, and at that time, yes, at that time I believe the Yoruba are not together at that time, because that is during the Kiriji War and Ijebu, Egba, Ile-Ife versus Ibadan and Oyo at that time. Because I could remember from what I read that when the British intervened in Ogun Kiriji War, the British told Egba, Ijebu, and Ile-Ife, please go back to your state. And they said to the British that no, tell Oyo people to go back to their country. They are the one in our territory,
that is absolute nonsense. The reason why this treaty came about,
because I have documents concerning that, and the witches, I believe that.
Let me tell you, that is absolute nonsense. One of the problems that we have.
Okay, sir. I want to ask one question.
I want to respond to it because I think this is important.
Okay.
A lot of these things that people talk are nonsense. One thing I've learned since I started doing all this research is that the first thing you do is you go and read the document. Not what somebody has interpreted, not what somebody has said has happened. You go and read it yourself. And you'll be very surprised at a lot of the nonsense that people talk about. Now, there is no, one of the reasons that this treaty came about was actually as a reward for the British having ended in 1886 the Yoruba Civil Wars. That's part of the reason why they asked the Alafin for a treaty. So the Yoruba Wars had finished in 1886, which Reverend Johnson was one of those who negotiated the truce. And part of the gift that Alafin was giving the Queen is actually that. I can read to you the first part of the treaty, so you understand what it says here. Okay, it says. Okay, this is what the treaty says. It said, in gratitude for what the Queen has at so much expense and risk to life done from time to time for my country. And then it says in the letter, because what happened was that the British were involved in putting an end to the Yoruba Civil War. And it was as a reward to the Queen that this treaty was put forward. So what I will suggest to anybody who, before you believe all these things that people say about.
All right, so I have one question, sir, because because I know this is people are watching us, because the treaty was signed in 1888, which comprised the whole Yoruba, including the Jebu, which I will still go again to look at it, because I believe that from what I've read so far, Ijebu, Ode, Jebugo, and other are not part. But with what you just said, don't mislead. Please do not mislead. Do not mislead your audience, because that is misleading. This is what part of the treaty. It says
I, Adeyemi Alaafin of Oyo, and head of Yorubaland, the four corners of which are and have been from time immemorial known as Egba, Ketu, Jebu, Oyo, embracing within its area that inhabited by all Yoruba-speaking peoples. That's what is in this treaty. It encompasses everything. It encompasses all the four corners of Yorubaland. So if anybody tells you there's something different,
I have one doubting question.
Okay.
The Kriji War started in 1877, and then it was ended in 1893, and then the treaty was signed in 1888. Is how the treaty signed during the war, when there is no settlement between the Yorubas, and the Alaafin signed the treaty for all the Yoruba. Are they agree in the war that the treaty will be signed? Because the war lasted for 16 years.
What exactly do you think it was like in those days? So there was somebody going around and having a referendum or what? I mean, what do you? One of the problems that I think we have is that we are using the lens of 2025. Wait a minute. You are using the lens of 2025 to look at an event that happened in 1888. That is part of our problem. That we have difficulty in actually understanding what it was like in 18. You think they were going around doing referendum and saying, oh, well, do you want to join us? Would you like me to represent you? That's not the way it worked. And I wrote a piece about this actually.
All right, sir.
Why?
One more question, sir. Okay, what brought at that time, because there is a newspaper called Egba News and Oyo, Iroyin Egba and Oyo. If I'm right, sir, that is one newspaper called is it not the Euro? I would say I tell them I say Iroyin Egba and Yoruba.
Okay, I'm listening.
Because at that time, the Egba people, the Jebi people, they believe they are not part of Yoruba.
But what is the evidence? I mean, you guys say all these things all the time. There's somebody in particular who has been backwards and forwards with me about how great Ife was, and Ife was on its own.
Exists now, because when you say Yoruba, Jebu don't believe that they are part of Oyo. They know that they came from Ile-Ife, because Ijebu knows that their origin is from Ile-Ife. They are not part of Oyo. They are not from Oyo.
Look, the argument, this argument is irrelevant. Let me be blunt. Let me be blunt with you.
All right, sir.
This argument that people are making, I am Ijesha. We Ijesha were on our own, and the Oyo, they were on their own. This lot is absolute arrant nonsense. The fact that you want to fight your own battle in 2025 is not the same as what was happening in 1888, when the Yoruba had just come out of a civil war. So when somebody suddenly tells you that Alaafin that the Ooni of Ife was paramount chief, this was paramount, it's arrant nonsense. It is a lack of understanding of the basic Yoruba history. And I will suggest that anybody who wishes to do this kind of argument, let me advise you, please write to the court in London and say you want to give your own evidence. We are in court in London. You have the opportunity of writing what is called an amicus brief. Rather than argue with me about whether Oyo is different from Egba or whatever, please write to the court in London and tell them that you think that the treaty should not have been signed. I think this argument that we are having is unproductive, totally unproductive. And I can't understand why any Yoruba person, that you will have a treaty that is as watertight as this, and Yoruba people will be fighting for what? This treaty gives you benefits. This is a treaty that gives Yoruba land benefits And then some people are going around telling you that Oyo is signing this, Egba is signing. You know, this is how Nigeria lost the Bakassi case. When in 1884 the British had signed a treaty with the Calabar rulers, because we engaged in this sort of pointless discussion, totally pointless exercise, which to me is a way of trying to show that people are trying to show that they are cleverer than we are. That's up to you. The court in England, in London, has accepted our case. If you feel that the case is wrong, then please contact the court and say to the court that you don't agree. All right? Because I think this argument between us is totally unproductive. If you want to talk about Yoruba, the way that the Yoruba polity was organized, I'm prepared to even have a session on it. The Yoruba never had a paramount ruler. The Ooni of Ife was not paramount ruler of anybody. Even though Ife is accepted to be the origin of the Yoruba, he was not paramount ruler of anything. To be a paramount ruler means you have power over somebody. What power did the Ooni of Ife have in history? What power? The elevation of Ooni of Ife was done by the British in the House of Assembly. They made the Ooni of Ife the governor. So when people start believing in this myth, this mythical somebody is bigger than somebody, it's just nonsensical. And this is an argument that we Yoruba engage in. It's a fruitless argument. Totally fruitless, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the treaty that we are discussing today. Absolutely nothing at all. And I can't understand how you will have a treaty that gives you advantage, and you're all fighting about, oh, we are from Oyo, oh, we are from, so what? You are from Ijebu, so what? What is it that you are Ijebu and therefore you don't want to benefit from a treaty that was signed on behalf of the Yoruba people? Even when you read the report by Lugard in 1919, I think his report was, he mentioned this sort of thing, that, you know, all these lesser chiefs, which was the way he described everybody else, were too busy bouncing, trying to get their independence from the Alaafin of Oyo. We Yoruba really need to stop this and spend. I mean, this is why I spent some time to try and explain the treaty. But instead of concentrating on what the treaty is, on the benefits of the treaty, we get engaged in completely fruitless argument. Anybody can argue till the cows come home. It's not going to affect this case. Doesn't matter whether you argue that another treaty was signed, you know, Captain Boa, who was going around signing treaty left, right, and center. Anyway, I have time for one more question before I go to the next.
Yes, for just one more question, then I think we still have time to ask you for. Let me just ẹ̀yin wa tí ẹ ń wò wá bàbá wa àwọn tí ń bẹ ní orí ètò pẹ̀lú wa bàbá wa Chief Dr. Olúṣọlá Òní tí gbogbo wa mọ̀ sí Báṣẹ́gun, àwọn ni wọ́n ń bẹ ní orí ètò pẹ̀lú wa lónìí, tí wọ́n jẹ́ olùdásílẹ̀ Yoruba Party in UK. Gbogbo wa la sì mọ iṣẹ́ takuntakun tí bàbá tí wọ́n ti kó. Àwọn ní ẹni àkọ́kọ́ because wọ́n ti gbìyànjú tí wọ́n kọ́kọ́ gbé ìjọba ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀ṣun àti ti Ògùn àti ti Èkìtì bá gbà dáadáa tí wọ́n kọ́ gbé wọn lọ sí ilé ẹjọ́ wípé election gbọ́dọ̀ wáyé, wípé ilẹ̀ Yorùbá dandan ni kí ó bọ́ sí. Ó tilẹ̀ yẹ pé gbogbo ìgbìyànjú bàbá kí ìgbẹ́jọ́ ọ̀hún kó lè wá sí ìmúṣẹ, Although because I do tell people about this case that you really tried for Yoruba people. It is possible just for a 2 minute. People want to know about this case. They want to know how do you do it. That to the point of that, the Nigerian government recognized Yoruba nation at that time, because the news is everywhere that the Lanomo Odua take the 3 or 4 states to the court to stop the governorship election, that they are not part of that Nigeria anymore. But suddenly things went, the table turned around. Please, can you explain, at least for these 2 minutes, want to know about it, sir?
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm happy to come back if people want me to talk about that.
Because people was asking me, that's why.
Yeah, but brief, let me deal with it briefly.
Okay.
One of the problems we have is that when something looks difficult,
all right,
people back out, or they find a reason why that difficult thing shouldn't be done. Well, life is full of difficulties.
Yes.
And you've got to deal with it. When it comes before you, you've got to deal with it. Most people don't know that it was on your program over a year ago,
yes,
that I decided that I was going to form a political party.
Yes, because Baba, but the letter hijacked you from me. I told someone today that today Baba did everything on my program, but later people hijack you from me, sir. You know that.
It was this sort of argument that we had then that made me go to set up a political party.
Yes.
And if you know the problems that I went through before I could register, because this is an ethnic political party in England, in UK.
Yeah. Yes.
It took a lot of effort, a lot of no, before I finally got it registered.
Yes, I know.
So I am not a person that is deterred by difficulty. In fact, the more difficult something is, the more I'm likely to persist. So the case that we have in court is difficult.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very difficult indeed.
All right.
But if you don't fight, you don't know if you can win.
Of course. Thank you. Let me ask the last question for today's program. The topic of today's program is the 1988 British and Yorubaland Treaty. The last question will be on the program is that, has British ever acknowledged the existence of this treaty? Have ever explained why the implementation was stopped? Why the implementation of the treaty was stopped?
The answer to both questions is no.
No.
That is why we are in court, because we wrote to them,
all right,
to say this is about this treaty. What are you doing about it? And they refused. They refused to give us an explanation. That's why we've ended up in court, because in court they will the explanation they didn't give us. They will have to give it to the court.
Give it to the court.
Even though they refused to give us that explanation. So we're awaiting, because the case has been in court now since August. On the 8th of August, we filed this case, which has been accepted by the administrative court, and we're awaiting a decision on the papers.
Okay.
Eventually, we have to go and argue our case. And part of the reason why we've taken this matter on the road is because we need a lot of money. It's going to cost us no less than £50,000.
Wow.
To hire a lawyer.
That's a lot of money, sir.
It is a lot of money, so and we are going to find it.
We can cut that at the difficulties in the process.
That's right. That's right.
How do we go about it, sir?
Well,
because this is a huge project that all the citizens in Nigeria, both home and abroad, must contribute to it, because this is our life. This is what we depend on.
That's why we are doing. That's why I'm going around talking to people to explain this is what the treaty is about. We need money to fight it in court, because people don't realize the important. This is a very, very important treaty, and we must not allow the case to just disappear. It's a very, very, very important treaty because it established the relationship between Britain and Yorubaland. I am happy to come next time to talk about.
Of course,
this treaty.
This will be the episode one.
To talk about this treaty, I'm going to talk about this. That this treaty is veto-proof. That is, Nigeria cannot veto this treaty.
Wow.
It's totally veto-proof. That's why we are in court, because we are confident. We're confident that the treaty is veto-proof. And if you invite me again, I'm happy to come and talk about.
Of course, definitely, sir. Definitely, sir. Thank you for our listener. This is the end of today's program because I have another meeting to attend to, and then we have been trying to back and forth concerning this treaty, and then I thank everyone of us who join us on this program. If you have any question concerning this treaty, please by next week, or if you're not up to that, please drop your question. You have our social media, media and website, and you have our number. Please, if you have any question on this treaty, please drop your question or your suggestion that can make us win this case. Baba, when you want to play Ilumaka Onaniwa, it's very known in everywhere, and then it is founder and the leader of Yoruba Party in UK. The party, at least they went the front battle until last year for the UK election. At least they won't try at least be the fourth position, not even at least we don't at least that first year is just a year of awareness. But we believe by the next election, people and then please, this is the way we can I can say that to all Yorubas who is living in UK, please join this party. Let us build this community. Let us build this legacy. Papa have tried to lay down the legacy for each and every one of you who are living and working in that UK. Participate, involve your in this. That will create a Yoruba community. Every other tribes, every other country, they have their own community in different way. So Yoruba Party in the UK, it is fully registered and they fully recognized. So those who are living in the UK, please participate. Baba,
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sir. Bàbá àwọn ni wọ́n ti ń bá wa sọ̀rọ̀ láti àtàárọ̀ a rí wípé ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n onímọ̀ olóye ọlọ́gbọ́n òun náà ni bàbá wa Dr. Olúṣọlá Òní, àwọn sì ni founder Yoruba Party ní UK. Bàbá wọ́n ti ṣe ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ iṣẹ́ gan eléyìí tí má ní gbàgbé fún ìran Yorùbá, and they still continue doing more no matter bó ti wùlẹ̀ wọ́n tún sì ń ṣe mọ́. Eléyìí yóò lè ràn wá lọ́wọ́ láti lè rí wípé lóòótọ́ a ní àwọn èèyàn tí wọ́n mọ̀ nípa ìtàn, àṣà àti ìṣẹ̀lẹ̀ Yorùbá, and they still want to give it out to every one of us to have that knowledge. Ìyẹn ló máa lè ràn wá lọ́wọ́ tí gbogbo wa tí a fi lè tẹ̀síwájú. Mo ní àwọn àlejò nílé ló tilẹ̀ pé ètò ọ̀hún ó ti parí. Bàbá Káì mórí tí wọ́n náwó sókè, máa fẹ́ kí wí àwọn náà kí wọ́n bá wa contribute sí ọ̀rọ̀ tó ń lọ yìí, torí pé èyí tó jọ kan gbogbo wa pápátá òun náà ni treaty ọ̀hún. Ẹ ṣé púpọ̀.
Ẹ kálẹ́ bàbá wa. Ẹ kálẹ́ o. Ẹ ń gbọ́ mi?
Mo ń dá inú sà, mo ń dá inú, yes.
Okay, mo kí àwọn bàbá wa tí wọ́n wá sí orí ètò. A dúpẹ́ púpọ̀ lọ́wọ́ yín. Ọlọ́run ọba láàánú jẹ́ kí ẹ pẹ́ fún wa. Ìbéèrè tí mi fẹ́ béèrè ni.
Okay, ṣàwọn ẹlẹ́fẹ̀ẹ́ bí léèrè àbí wọ́n ti jáde, wọ́n ní another meeting.
Okay.
Wọ́n ti jáde. All right, ẹ ṣé gan ni wọ́n ti jáde. Ẹ̀yin wa ibi la máa fi àdàgbé tòní rọ̀ sí oníyanṣẹ́ ọlọ́bẹ̀ṣe ẹ̀ tẹ́ bá wa jẹ́ náà ẹ kú ẹ tún pàdé wa ní agbára Ọlọ́run nígbà tí a tún máa gbé bàbá wa lẹ́ẹ̀kan sí lórí ohun tó farajọ tó fara mọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ Yorùbá. Mùsùlùmí wa náà la nífẹ̀ẹ́ sí láti mọ ibi tí ìran wa tí ó dé dúró, ibi tá a ti ń bọ̀, ibi tá a ń lọ. àti ibi tí a lè lò títí di Ọlọ́run sí ìgbà mi tá à ń pàdé eré kápẹ́tì eré kàǹkà lọ́lẹ̀ kan wa lágbára Ọlọ́run ní tójú oorun dojúkú Olódùmarè yóò wà pẹ̀lú wa ó dàárọ̀.
Ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa gbọ́, ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa gbọ́, Yorùbá World Media ni mò ń sọ o. Ó ti yá o ká jíjọ máa gbọ́, Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó dúró tán fún jàǹgbára òmìnira ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó ń gbẹnu ọmọ Yorùbá sọ̀rọ̀ fún òmìnira ilẹ̀ wa. Yoruba World Media. Ìkànnì tó ń sọ̀rọ̀ sókè fún òmìnira ìran aládé gbogbo. Yoruba World Media. Lórí YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. Yoruba World Media. Láti darapọ̀ mọ́ wa tàbí tẹ́ ẹ bá fẹ́ bá wa dòwò pọ̀ ní Yoruba World Media, ẹ kàn sí wa lórí www.yorubaworldmedia.com tàbí kẹ́ fi àtẹ̀jíṣẹ́ ṣọwọ́ sí wa látòrí ímeèlì wa